Have you ever considered the story of Samson to be a story of redemption? Let me tell you why I see it as a story of redemption. And maybe you have. But I was studying it recently, and typically as a kid, when I would hear the story of Samson, it was always Samson, Delilah, and then towards the end of his death. But we really see the story of Samson from Judges 14, 15, and 16, and so much happens in there. We won't read all of that right now. So much happens in that story of Samson. Here's what's interesting to me. Samson, throughout his life, he's a Nazarite, so no razor is supposed to come on his head. So he's got long hair, he's strong, he's a judge. I mean, he's kind of like, I don't know, the way I picture Samson is someone who is popular. He's a believer, but he's definitely, he's got all the good things going for him. Here's what's interesting to me. Samson marries a wife from the Philistines in Timnath, not Delilah. I think a lot of times growing up, I got that confused. I thought Delilah was the wife. Delilah was not. It was a different person. So he marries a Philistine woman. A lot happens. The wife is taken from him and given to a companion, someone that he thought was a friend. And he gets very angry. He catches 300 foxes. How does one do that? How does one catch 300 foxes on their own? And then he catches their fields on fire. The Philistines at this time had rule over the Israelites. So they weren't like their servants like we see like in Egypt, but they had rule over the land. So making them mad and getting them all ticked off and catching their fields on fire was not something you really wanted to do. That was not good. Samson, when you read the first part of that story, to me, he has no fear. He's smart. He kind of tells jokes. He likes to tell riddles, but he has no fear. He knows he's strong. He knows God's gifted him in that area. He has no fear. Here's what's interesting. When you read Judges 14, 15, and 16, and then you see him go into another, what we would consider a prostitute. The Bible refers to it as a harlot. And the Philistines try to come into him again and kill him again, and he escapes again. Before we get to Delilah, it says he reigned as a judge, not reigned, but he served as a judge for 20 years. I always thought that Samson was like really young when the thing with Delilah happened, and maybe he was super young. I don't know. But being a judge for 20 years makes me feel like he wasn't like 18, 19 years old, right? He was older. And he had been fighting the Philistines for a long time. We just see highlights of Samson's life. We don't see the full span of how old he was when this happened or what happened in those 20 years. What good decisions did he make? We just see highlights of some not so good decisions that he made. And I would love to talk to him one day and just ask him some questions. But here's what I want to highlight today. When Samson finds Delilah, he has a weakness, right? He fights the Philistines all the time, but his weakness is women. That's pretty much in every story that we see of Samson. There's a woman involved. And then Delilah asks him where his strength comes from. It never says that she's a Philistine, but she's working with the Philistines, and she's totally okay with the money that they're going to give her. She's working for the money. He tells her something, and she tries. Doesn't work. Tells her something again. Tries. It doesn't work. What's interesting to me, the very last time is when he says he told her all of his heart. And she knew that was the truth. She knew. So then the Philistines come in. But here's where it gets really sad. The Philistines come in. And it says that he knew not, the Spirit of God was not with him. When you're walking with God, it feels different than when you're not walking with God. When I'm talking or praying, I'm talking to someone about God and I'm walking with him, it just feels different. I know when I'm working with the boys and I'm saying something to the boys and I'm not patient with them, I know when I'm walking with God or not walking with God. I know it. I know the Spirit of God is not on me when I lose my patience or I lose my cool or I say something sarcastic when I shouldn't. I know that. Here's what's interesting. Well, there's a lot of things interesting, but it says he knew not the Spirit of God was upon him. Then they take him to the prison, and they cut out his eyes. But his name, Gideon, literally meant sun, light. And when they cut out his eyes and they shave his head, and then the lights are gone out, his light is gone. In the Hebrew culture and tradition, they would wait several days before naming a child so they could spend time with that child to know what his name should be. And Samson's name meant light. It meant sun, like the sun. And when they cut his eyes out and they put him in prison, we don't know how long he was in prison. Again, I always had this idea he was in prison for I don't know. I just thought he was in prison for a really, really long time. But, everyone's hair grows differently. He was in prison, but his hair grew back. So when his hair grew back, that's when his strength came back. So it's interesting. It could have been 6 months or a year. I don't know. And I don't know how long. It doesn't say how long his hair was. But then when Samson, it says there was a boy leading him. The boy led him, and he asked to be put by one of the pillars. And they're making sport of him. They're mocking him. And when he prays to God, that prayer is the first prayer we see him pray in the whole book. He doesn't pray when his wife is taken from him. He doesn't pray when he realizes his wife's been given to a friend. He doesn't pray when he's sleeping with a prostitute and the Philistines come in and try to kill him. He doesn't pray. Maybe he did. We just don't have it on record. But it was recorded that he prayed. And that prayer is so meaningful. He prays and he said, God, they have taken out my eyes. They've taken out my eyes. He wasn't praying and saying, help me, restore me to who I was, and give me my hair and my strength back, and give me back my eyes. When he prays, he is heartbroken over his eyes. He prays. He asks God to let him die with them. He doesn't say, let me live with them, or let me survive this so I can tell your story. He said, just let me die with them. And then it says he kills more Philistines in his death than he does in his life. There was 3,000 that were on the rooftop that day that died with Samson. I find it so interesting that when he prayed, that heartfelt cry to God, he mentioned his eyes. He had strength. He had hair. He had the woman he wanted. He had everything in life that he wanted. He was a judge in Israel. He was a Nazarite. He was strong. And in his own strength, he couldn't do what God did when he humbled himself and came before him. And not all stories of redemption end with flowers and rainbows and parades. That's not how it always ends. And Samson's story didn't end like that. And it's funny because as a mom now, I think when I read the stories in the Bible, I read them and think about, where's the mom? And I don't know where the mom was. But the mom may not have even known that Samson had cried out to God in his last hours and last moments of life. She may not have even known. And wherever you're at today, whatever you're going through, sometimes our stories of redemption are wonderful, and sometimes they are tragic. God used Samson to defeat the Philistines more in his death than he did in his life. When he was walking with God, even though he walked with God, but in his own strength a lot, he still had a weakness for women. that was very clear throughout all of Scripture. And I can't wait one day to get to heaven and ask Samson questions about what happened in his life. What happened with those final moments? Why didn't he pray that he would survive? Why didn't he pray that God would give him his vision back? He believed in a God of miracles. He could have prayed that, but he didn't. He didn't. So friends, wherever you're at today, I want you to be encouraged that no one is too far gone for God to use them. No one is, they think, well, this has been taken from me or that's been taken from me. I can't be used by God. Now, the end of your life hopefully will not end like Samson's, ending in a pile of rubble. But no matter where you are in your life, God can use your story. God can redeem your story. Samson was in a prison with no hair that symbolized his Nazirite vow, no eyes. The women, the friends, his parents, they were gone. Just him and God. And that is when he cries out to God. So wherever you're at today, just know that you are never, ever too far gone for God to use and redeem your story. Have a great day.